Welcome back to her Fireside Stories. She called my gift cheap right in front of her friends during her birthday party after I spent 3 weeks painting it by hand. That moment shattered something inside me. I had raised Celeste like my own daughter. Skipped vacations, skipped new coats, skipped me just to save for her college. And all it took was one dismissive laugh, one smirk to make me realize maybe my love had been invisible to her all along. That night, I opened my laptop, stared at the college fund I'd built with sacrifice and quiet hope. Then I transferred every last cent out. And no, I didn't feel guilty. Not that night. I still remember the shock of it, like stepping barefoot onto a shard of glass when my granddaughter Celeste lifted the hand-painted gift I'd spent weeks creating and sneered at it in front of a crowd. It was her 18th birthday celebration, and in one breath she reduced my heartfelt artwork to something cheap, turning all the warmth in my chest to ice. That very moment, I decided the college fund I had scraped together for years, skipping my own comforts and cutting corners on groceries, was no longer hers to claim. You might think me cruel or callous, but if you'd seen the way her glossy, dark auburn hair, cut in trendy layers that fell just above her shoulders, swayed indifferently as she dismissed my offering, you'd understand the betrayal that simmered in my veins. In that single instant, she was no longer the wide-eyed child I once adored, the one who used to sit on my lap and smudge watercolors across construction paper while calling me Nana. My name is Cora Mitchell, and I'm a widow, an artist, and a grandmother, though I once thought of myself more as a mother to Celeste than any other role my daughter Aubrey had. Celeste young, and as she juggled two jobs, I stepped in to raise that little girl with a quiet pride that could fill 100 canvases. If you ever saw me in my small Montpelier, Vermont bungalow, you'd find me with silver hair pulled back in a graceful bun, often splattered with flecks of paint. Art has always been my refuge, a way to capture the beauty and pain life so often throws our way. Yet never in my wildest nightmares did I imagine that my own granddaughter would use my greatest passion against me. On that sunny afternoon under a white tent filled with well-dressed guests, Celeste unwrapped my painting, an image steeped in memories of her earliest years, and ridiculed it. At first, I tried to shake it off, reminding myself she was young and maybe embarrassed in front of her sophisticated friends. But then, as the new pop music thumped from the speakers and the laughter swelled, I saw her glance at me with an almost triumphant smirk. It was the look of someone who had won a game I didn't even know we were playing. And just like that, in the same span of time it took for her to toss the painting aside, I made a quiet but irreversible choice that would change both our lives forever. After that party, I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The normal familiar road seemed alien. Every street sign was a blur, every turn too sharp. I kept replaying Celeste's laughter in my mind, the way she ran her fingers through those salon-styled auburn layers, without so much as a glance in my direction. I think I was waiting for her to realize she'd hurt me. But she never did. She just went on with her party, collecting gift cards, new tech fancy clothes, all the while dismissing the painting I had poured my heart into. I had stayed silent, humiliated, and quietly left before the celebration ended. When I reached my bungalow, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I slipped off my shoes and wandered into the kitchen, the worn linoleum cold under my feet. In the dimness, I hovered by the table where Celeste and I once sat for hours as she doodled rainbows and crooked hearts. I recall how she'd look up at me with big, curious eyes, her hair then in messy pigtails, asking me which crayons made the prettiest colors. Now she was an entirely different person, stylish, distant, and ungrateful. I felt like a stranger in my own story, wondering how we'd become so disconnected. My heart felt hollow, as though someone had scooped out all the tenderness I'd ever felt for her. But then an even sharper emotion sliced through the numbness. Anger, I remembered the sacrifices. Every winter coat I didn't buy, every dentist appointment I'd postponed for myself. Every coupon I clipped to feed my own dream of sending her to college without debt. She called my gift cheap, but she had no idea how expensive my love had been. Something inside me snapped a quiet shift that told me things would never be the same. I marched to the small desk in the corner of the living room, flipped open my ancient laptop, and logged into my online banking. The college fund stared back at me, a tidy sum that had cost me so many small joys. My hand trembled on the mouse, but my resolve was absolute. Without hesitating, I transferred every cent into my personal account. The next morning, as dawn lightened the sky, I sat at my kitchen table sipping lukewarm tea. The night's decision weighed on me, but in a strangely liberating way. Usually, I'd be racked with guilt over taking back something I had promised. Guilt, after all, had been the backbone of how I navigated motherhood and grandmotherhood, always sacrificing, always putting myself last. But this time, I felt none. I told myself it wasn't out of cruelty. In that moment, it felt more like self-preservation. Celeste had battered my heart to the point where I wondered if she even saw me as a person, or just a walking ATM. I stared at a family photo pinned to my fridge, an image from years ago, me, my daughter Aubrey, back when her hair was a simple shoulder-length cut, rather than the sleek professional bob she sports now, and little Celeste in pigtails, grinning like she had just discovered the sun. The memory was as sweet as it was painful. I knew if Celeste found out I had reclaimed the fund, she would be furious. But then a part of me wondered if she'd even care beyond the money's disappearance. Maybe she'd simply move on, find someone else to foot her bills, or rely on loans and scholarships. She was bright enough to manage that, I reasoned. She was resourceful when she wanted something. The realization that she might not bother to ask why Nana gnawed at me more than anger ever could. Then, almost on cue, my phone vibrated on the table. A short text from Celeste. Nana, can I come by today? Miss you. My heart leapt, and not in a purely happy way. It was a nervous jolt like a startled bird taking flight. Despite everything, I texted back a quick, sure. Perhaps she wanted to apologize. Perhaps the humiliating comment was a momentary lapse in judgment. Perhaps she'd walked through my front door, tears in her eyes, and begged me to forgive her. I turned the kettle back on, noticing how steady my hands felt despite the roiling in my stomach. Whatever happened next, I was prepared to face it. Celeste arrived just after noon, balancing a box of pastries from the local bakery and sporting that brand new haircut I had glimpsed at her party, a stylish layered look that framed her face in a way designed to capture attention. She greeted me with a smile so bright it bordered on theatrical, then pressed a kiss to my cheek before waltzing into the kitchen like she still lived here. Nana, I brought your favorite cinnamon rolls, she announced, placing the box on the counter. She wore a peach-colored blouse, designer jeans, and the faintest hint of perfume. Everything about her appearance screamed that she was trying to impress me. My mind wandered back to the night before, remembering how I'd drained the college account with a single click. My chest tightened with conflicting emotions, regret, anger, longing. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once balanced on my lap, to watch me paint watercolor flowers. Now she prattled on about school, her friends, and the big birthday bash, conveniently glossing over my departure, or her remarks about my cheap gift. She mentioned that she was considering applying to multiple art programs, including the illustrious one she'd always dreamed of attending in California, but then she waved her hand dismissively. Of course, it's ridiculously expensive, she sighed, and I was hoping. She paused, biting her lip as if she were uncertain how to phrase her request. The tension in the room thickened. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she worked up to what she wanted. I leaned back, sipping my tea without saying a word. Her polite chatter continued for a while. She apologized if she had seemed ungrateful at the party, chalking it up to nerves and excitement. You know how birthdays can be, she said, flashing me an almost pleading look, but I wasn't ready to melt. Not after everything. So I watched her letting the silence fill the space between us when her words ran out. She shifted in her chair, fiddling with a stray piece of her layered hair. Nana, she finally said, voice quieter now. I really do appreciate everything you've done for me. I hope you know that. In that moment, I felt a war raging inside me. On one side, there was the grandmother who had practically raised Celeste, who remembered every lost tooth and scraped knee, who saw the sweet spark in her eyes as a toddler. On the other, there was the wounded woman who felt used, belittled, and dismissed. My resolve wavered. Maybe she was sincere. Maybe the heartbreak I felt from her public scorn was overshadowing her genuine remorse. I sighed, setting my mug on the table. The faint clang of ceramic against wood echoed in the otherwise quiet kitchen. Celeste, I began carefully choosing my words. I need to know something. Did you understand how important that painting was to me? For a moment, her eyes flickered and she hesitated. I guess I didn't realize how big a deal it was. I just thought it was, well, a nice gesture, but not. She trailed off, her voice faltering. I inhaled slowly, mustering the courage to say what needed saying. I poured my heart into that painting. It wasn't just art. It was years of memories, moments we shared. When you laughed at it, you were laughing at all that. I cherish my love, my effort, and the pieces of our life together. She stared down at her manicured nails, fresh with a neon pink polish. Her bottom lip trembled just enough to seem earnest. Nana, I'm really sorry, she whispered. I was thoughtless. It was a dumb, shallow thing to do. Part of me wanted to reach out and hug her, to bury my face in her hair and pretend everything was back to normal. But I stayed where I was, because deep down I suspected there was more to this apology. Sure enough, after a short lull, she looked up with tears in her eyes. Do you think you can forgive me? And maybe we can talk about my college plans? Cal Arts is my dream, and I know you've been saving up. My heart clenched. There it was, the real reason. In a swift moment of clarity, I saw that her apology might be tied to the money she assumed was waiting for her. My throat felt tight, but I forced myself to remain composed. No one had told her yet that the account was empty, that her college nest egg was back in my possession. I'll think about it, I replied, my voice sounding measured even to my own ears. Celeste gave me a relieved smile, mistaking my careful answer for a guarantee. She rose from the chair, came around the table, and hugged me. I could feel her trembling against me, or maybe I was the one who was shaking. She left the house, promising to text me later, the swirl of her auburn layers brushing my cheek in a perfumed whisper before the door clicked shut behind her. Alone in the kitchen, once more, I reached for the pastries she'd left, but my appetite was gone. My mind buzzed with a whirlwind of emotions, love, anger, longing, and a kind of fierce determination I'd never felt before. For years, I'd been the backbone of the family, the constant giver. Now the act of protecting my own heart felt foreign but necessary. I realized I couldn't keep living in this tension, half grandmother, half protective stranger. Yet I wasn't entirely sure how to proceed. Should I confront her directly and tell her the fund was gone? Should I wait and watch her reveal her true motives? A part of me, the part that had always been so forgiving, ached to believe she was genuine. But the wound from her birthday insult was still raw, and I wasn't about to let her trample over my feelings again. I stood up, paced the living room, and eyed the paintings that lined the walls. My little gallery of memories. Each stroke told a piece of my story. My late husband Elliot's favorite fishing spot, a sunset from a family vacation long ago, the orchard behind our home where Celeste once picked apples with a red wagon in tow. So many glimpses of a life I cherished, overshadowed now by the fear that Celeste only wanted me for my money. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing: the old Cora would have caved under guilt. The new Cora wasn't so easily swayed. Despite my mounting suspicion, I decided to give Celeste a chance to show me she was serious about our relationship, not just the college fund. Over the next few weeks, she popped by more frequently, dropping off groceries, sharing short updates about her life, and even asking if she could help with chores around the house. At first, it felt like a small miracle. I caught myself smiling when I heard her voice remembering the bond we once had when she was a child. Yet, amid these pleasant visits, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that she was playing a role. The more she tried to prove her devotion, the more it felt rehearsed. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of impatience in her eyes, like she was waiting for me to bring up the topic of finances. But I never did. I feigned ignorance, asking her about school or her new friends. She'd answer politely, but her excitement always flickered out whenever our conversations drifted away from potential scholarships or tuition plans. One afternoon, she helped me clean out the spare room, which was cluttered with old canvases and half-finished projects. We joked about some of my more experimental artwork, abstract pieces I'd never dared show anyone else. Celeste lifted one painting, a swirl of blues and pinks, examining it with genuine curiosity. "Did you ever consider showing this in a gallery?" "Nana," she asked, eyes narrowed as though truly observing the brushwork. I shrugged, my cheeks warming at the unexpected praise. "I'm not sure it's gallery material," I said, "but I'm glad you like it." For a moment, I saw the Celeste. I used to know the earnest, creative child brimming with curiosity. It was like glimpsing sunlight through a break in the clouds. The moment passed swiftly, though, when she offhandedly mentioned how a friend of hers had just secured a partial scholarship to a private university. "I'm really hoping my financial situation works out," she said pointedly, glancing at me with a hopeful smile. I pretended not to notice the subtext. I simply nodded, folded an old drop cloth, and changed the subject. But inside, my heart twisted. I wondered if she was truly learning to value our relationship, or just calculating how to retrieve the money she assumed was still waiting in her name. It was around this time that my daughter Aubrey found out. I had withdrawn the entire college fund. She called me late on a Wednesday night, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. "Mom, what is Celeste talking about?" "She says the account's empty." I'd known this confrontation was inevitable. Steadying my breath, I admitted that yes, I had taken the money back. Her reaction was immediate. "Are you insane?" That was for her future. Aubrey had always been pragmatic. Her dark hair, once a carefree wave in her teens, now styled into a sleek, no-nonsense bob that perfectly matched her demanding corporate job. She rarely visited unless there was a logistical concern or a family holiday she couldn't avoid. Hearing the panic in her voice, I realized this phone call wasn't rooted in concern for me, but fear that her daughter's education might be derailed. "Why would you do something like that?" Aubrey pressed. "You saved for years, and now you're just pulling the rug out from under her." I took a moment, letting her words settle. "I'm not obligated to pay for her college," I said quietly but firmly. "She humiliated me, and if you'd seen it, you'd understand why I made this decision." Aubrey huffed as though my explanation was childish. "So, you're letting a teenager's bad attitude sabotage her whole future?" Her tone was thick with disapproval. I felt my lips tighten into a thin line. "Aubrey, it was more than a bad attitude. And whether or not Celeste goes to college is not up to me. She can still apply for scholarships, grants, or maybe take out a loan. It's not the end of her future, it's the end of me being taken for granted." For a moment, all I heard on the other end was breathing. Then, in a clipped voice, Aubrey warned me. I'd regret this, that I was severing ties with my own granddaughter. Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at the phone, my emotions a stew of guilt, anger, and surprising relief. Once I would have chased after her approval. Now I felt something else, a steely resolve that told me this was the right thing for me. A few days later, I woke to find an unexpected email waiting in my inbox. A small online art forum where I'd occasionally posted images of my paintings had featured one of my works on their homepage. The piece they'd chosen was a soft watercolor of my backyard garden. In spring, pale pink peonies, tender green foliage, and a flutter of sunlight that I'd captured in a swirl of golden paint. The email congratulated me on making the front page, explaining that my painting had garnered an impressive number of positive comments. I clicked through, heart pounding. Strangers wrote about how peaceful and hopeful the piece felt, about how it reminded them of home. Reading their words, I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I wasn't used to such open appreciation for my art. I'd always painted for myself or for family, not expecting recognition beyond polite compliments. Emboldened by the warm reception, I decided to post another image, this time the very painting Celeste had so cruelly dismissed at her birthday. It was a collage of memories, the swing set from her childhood, the time we baked cookies in the kitchen, and the golden retriever we once had, each memory wove into the next in subtle transitions of color. I titled it Precious Ties and wrote a short description about how it represented family bonds that had shaped me even when those bonds proved fragile. Within hours, the painting was flooded with comments, shares, and messages from people who felt moved by it. They wrote about the grandparents who raised them, about the regrets they had in neglecting family, about the quiet sacrifices so many older generations make without ever asking for credit. One woman pleaded for a print, saying she wanted to hang it in her mother's nursing home room. Another asked if I sold my art. As I read each heartfelt note, a strange sense of validation swelled inside me, like the creative spirit I'd kept hidden for so long was finally stepping into the light. I wasn't just a grandmother or a mother or a widow. I was an artist, and people saw worth in what I made. Buoyed by the support from that online community, I set up a small online shop to sell prints. I didn't expect much, perhaps a few sales here and there, but within a week, I received more orders than I had paintings to offer. My once quiet life suddenly became a whirl of bubble wrap padded envelopes and trips to the post office. A local printmaker offered to help me produce high quality reproductions of my work. He was a gentle soul named Victor, with silver streaked hair combed neatly to the side and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Word spread, and soon an old acquaintance reached out. Sophia, a friend of a friend who worked at a small gallery in Burlington. She wanted to feature 3 of my pieces in a group show focusing on emerging artists. At first, I laughed at the idea of being called an emerging artist in my 60s. But the more we talked, the more I felt like maybe I was finally emerging from years of self-doubt and overshadowed potential. So I agreed. My paintings were framed, hung on pristine white walls, next to works by artists half my age. I remember the opening night vividly. The faint hum of chatter, the clink of wine glasses, the subtle scent of fresh paint. My heart fluttered with excitement and nerves as I watched visitors pause to study my art. Some of them even took pictures and asked the gallery staff about me. It was surreal, exhilarating, and terrifying in equal measure. During the show, I overheard one couple discussing my piece that depicted Celeste's childhood. The woman said it felt deeply personal, like stepping into someone's tender memories. I nearly cried right there, not out of sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of being seen and understood. Back home that night, I draped a cloth over my easel, a tradition I'd formed to tuck in my paintings before bed. Then I sank into the old armchair in my living room, exhausted yet brimming with gratitude. I realized that while losing Celeste's affection, if it was indeed lost, hurt me deeply, I had found a new source of validation. My own voice expressed through art. The gallery show opened a door in my life I never knew existed. Suddenly, I had more requests from local collectors, interior designers, and even a few random admirers who found me on social media. One afternoon, a journalist named Walter reached out wanting to do a short human interest piece on the grandmother who painted her way into people's hearts. Walter arrived at my house on a crisp Saturday morning, a notepad in hand and a friendly grin beneath his neatly trimmed beard. We sat in my living room, the same room where Celeste once spent many nights reading bedtime stories. Walter asked about my background, how I developed my style, and why I focused so much on familial themes. Nervousness fluttered in my stomach, but as we spoke, I realized how freeing it felt to articulate my journey, the missed opportunities in my youth, the quiet acceptance of my role as caregiver, and the wellspring of creativity I'd pushed aside for decades. I found myself sharing more than I intended about Celeste's party, the painting she dismissed, and how that moment propelled me to reclaim both my artwork and my finances. Walter listened intently, only occasionally jotting notes. Before leaving, he thanked me and said my story would resonate with many readers, young and old. It's never too late to live the life you want. He commented, a spark of genuine admiration in his eyes. A week later, the article went live on a regional website and was subsequently picked up by a larger news outlet. My email inbox flooded with messages from people who saw themselves in my story. Women who had also prioritized family over personal ambition, individuals who felt overlooked and finally wanted to reclaim their passions. I responded to each message as best as I could, marveling at how a single act of self-defense, taking back that college fund, had become something of a rallying cry for others searching for their own sense of purpose. It dawned on me then that my paintings weren't just pictures on a canvas. They were catalysts, sparking conversations, offering solace, and hinting at new beginnings. Meanwhile, the tension with Celeste simmered beneath the surface. She texted me sporadically asking if I'd had time to rethink the college fund situation, often inserting sugary sentiments about missing our special bond. I replied with polite, vague messages, neither confirming nor denying the status of the fund. Aubrey tried calling again, but I let it go to voicemail, deciding I needed more time to process everything. Art became my sanctuary. I poured my tangled emotions into fresh canvases, swirling shapes of mother and child, fleeting silhouettes of a young girl running through a field. In each brushstroke, I wrestled with the pain of betrayal and the ache of a once close relationship drifting apart. But I also painted hope, a bright spot on the horizon, a reaching hand, or the soft glow of dawn. Then one evening, I received an unexpected phone call from a gallery owner in New York City. She introduced herself as Lucille Sinclair, curator of a small but respected Manhattan gallery that specialized in showcasing underrepresented voices. "I stumbled upon your work online," she said, her voice warm yet professional. "I was especially moved by that piece you titled Precious Ties. I'd love to feature you in an upcoming exhibition, focusing on family memory and resilience." My breath caught in my throat. Me in a Manhattan gallery. It sounded too grand, too unreal. Yet Lucille's conviction was unmistakable. She proposed a month-long show where each featured artist would get a dedicated wall. "I believe your paintings, especially the ones woven with personal memory, will truly resonate," she explained. I hung up feeling both exhilarated and terrified. How could I, a grandmother from Vermont, step into the bustling art scene of New York City? But then I recalled Walter's words, "It's never too late to live the life you want." A spark of excitement flickered, and for the first time in decades, I felt that the road ahead was wide open. Enjoying this journey? Don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt storytelling and insights. Your support means the world to creators like me. Preparing for the New York exhibition was a whirlwind of logistics, self-doubt, and bursts of creative inspiration. I locked myself in my makeshift studio for days at a time, rummaging through old memories, photographs, and half-finished paintings. Some nights I barely slept, caught in a fervor of creative energy that pulsed through my veins. My silver hair, usually swept neatly into a bun, stuck out in unruly wisps. From constantly running my fingers through it, I probably looked half mad, but I didn't care. I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. Of course, there were obstacles. Shipping the paintings, framing costs, and making the trip to Manhattan weren't cheap. But ironically, I had the college fund to thank for that. As painful as the circumstances were, that money now allowed me to seize an opportunity I'd never have afforded otherwise. And if Celeste or Aubrey ever discovered that truth, well, let them. I refuse to keep apologizing for living my life on my terms. Despite my new sense of resolve, Celeste still lurked in the back of my mind. Every so often, she'd send a sweet text about how she missed painting with me as a kid, or how she hoped we could have a proper visit soon. The younger me would have melted, but now I found myself reading between the lines, wondering if each affectionate word was a calculated step toward reinstating the college fund. On the eve of my trip, I decided to email her. I didn't mention the money or the New York show. Instead, I wrote a simple note about how I loved her and always would, but that I needed to focus on my own journey for a while. It was honest, if not entirely satisfying. I feared she might interpret it as a brush off, but I hoped she'd see it as a lifeline, a reminder that my love was still there, just no longer tied to an unspoken obligation. When I didn't get an immediate response, I tried not to dwell on it. I zipped my suitcase shut, carefully packed my canvases, and prepared myself for a future I never saw coming. Stepping into the Manhattan Gallery for the first time felt like entering a different universe. The place was a flurry of activity assistants adjusting lights, artists carting their work in bubble wrap, and Lucille Sinclair's short black pixie cut and sharp designer suit moving around with a purposeful gait as she gave instructions. The walls echoed with the promise of art waiting to be revealed, and each footstep reverberated in my chest. I stood there clutching my battered portfolio case, feeling every bit the outsider. But Lucille spotted me immediately, her crimson lips curving into a welcoming smile. "Cora, we've been waiting for you. Let's get you set up." Her warm confidence was infectious, helping to quell the storm in my stomach. Over the next hours, I hung my pieces along a section of crisp white wall. Each painting spoke to a fragment of my life. The collage capturing Celeste's childhood joys, a portrait of my late husband Elliot in soft earth tones, a more abstract representation of the quiet heartbreak I'd felt in losing the close bond with my granddaughter Lucille stood back, arms folded, and surveyed the display. "It's powerful," she finally said, a note of reverence in her voice. The opening reception took place that evening, and it was nothing short of surreal. I wore a simple black dress and a pair of modest heels, feeling self-conscious at first amid the fashionable crowd. But soon I realized these people weren't here to scrutinize me. They were here for the art. Curious visitors approached wine glasses in hand, asking questions about my process, about the stories behind each painting. A few recognized my name from the recent media buzz. At one point, I overheard a tall woman in a flowing scarf discuss my painting, Precious Ties, with another visitor. She called this series a testament to generational bonds, the woman said, but there's a hint of sadness in the way the colors fade at the edges, like she's mourning something. Her companion nodded clearly, moved. I had to step aside, tears stinging my eyes. This was all so new, so affirming, and yet so overwhelming. For the first time in years, I felt like I was at the center of something of my own life. By the close of the reception, I'd sold 2 of my pieces. That alone was enough to leave me breathless with gratitude. Yet more meaningful than the money were the personal stories people shared with me. A woman in her 20s explained how she'd been estranged from her grandmother and was inspired to reach out again. A middle-aged man felt compelled to mend fences with his mother after seeing how memories and regret can intertwine in my paintings. When I got back to my small hotel that night, I fell onto the bed in a state of weary bliss. My phone buzzed with texts, congratulations from acquaintances, new social media follows, and a message from Aubrey. My chest tightened as I opened it, expecting accusations or guilt trips, but instead it read, "Mom heard about your show. Congratulations." No further detail, but it was a start. Tears pooled in my eyes, a mix of relief and sadness. It wasn't the warm embrace I might have hoped for. But in our family, any glimmer of acknowledgement was better than the silence that usually loomed. Celeste, on the other hand, hadn't sent a single word about my exhibition. Maybe Aubrey hadn't told her. Maybe Celeste just didn't care. I tried to remind myself that my worth didn't hinge on her validation. The next few days in Manhattan passed in a blur of interviews, gallery events, and quiet moments of introspection. I wandered through Central Park's sketchbook in hand, occasionally stopping to capture a scene of the city's hustle and bustle. For the first time since I was a young girl, I felt the energy of possibility coursing through me, as if the city's lights had ignited something dormant. By the end of the exhibition, I'd made enough connections to keep my art career rolling forward. More galleries showed interest. A small arts publication asked to feature me in an upcoming issue. As I packed my paintings for the trip back to Vermont, I felt both triumphant and uncertain. Success was unfolding before me, yet my heart still carried the ache of familial discord. Returning to Vermont was like stepping back into a quiet painting after experiencing the bold, dynamic strokes of the city. The crisp mountain air and the rolling hills that greeted me were a comforting reminder of home. I exhaled tension I hadn't realized I was holding, happy to trade the city's neon glare for the soft glow of my porch light. I'd barely settled back in when I received a knock at my door. Standing there dressed in a navy blazer and a stern expression was Aubrey. Her sleek bob accentuated the hard lines of her face, and she held her arms stiffly at her sides. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped in, scanning the living room as though searching for evidence of wrongdoing. "I see you're back," she said. There was no hostility in her tone, just a taut readiness for confrontation. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit, but she remained standing. "I heard your show in New York went well." "It did," I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. "I sold a few pieces." She pursed her lips. "That's good. Listen, Mom, we need to talk about Celeste. She's been acting out, says you took all her college money. I'm worried about her." I took a slow breath, bracing myself. "Aubrey, she humiliated me. You know that, and I'm not obligated to pay her tuition." It was a gift I intended to give, but she cut me off, exhaling sharply. "You never told me the full story." She said something mean, but teenagers say dumb things all the time. Was it really worth this kind of drastic measure? I couldn't hide the hurt flaring inside me. She made me feel worthless, like everything I've done, everything I've ever sacrificed meant nothing. Then she pretended to care so she could get the money back. This isn't just about a teenager being rude. Once, it's about a pattern of disrespect and manipulation. Aubrey's shoulders slumped slightly. For a moment, I saw a flicker of empathy in her eyes. Then, as quickly as it came, she steeled herself again. "Well, I'd appreciate if you talked to her soon. She's still my daughter, your granddaughter." "I know," I said softly, "but this time I'm putting myself first." Over the next few days, I wrestled with the emotional fallout of my conversation with Aubrey. The old me would have caved, apologized for making things difficult, and offered to reinstate the college fund. But the new me held firm. I refused to sabotage my own peace and well-being, especially after a lifetime of compromising for others. In the midst of that turmoil, a surprising development occurred. My social media presence skyrocketed. The article Walter wrote and the coverage from the Manhattan exhibit had gone viral in certain art circles. I found myself inundated with messages from aspiring artists, journalists, and even a few celebrity personalities who stumbled upon my story and found it inspiring. One afternoon, I scrolled through comments and direct messages, amazed at how many people connected with my narrative of sacrifice, heartbreak, and eventual self-discovery. Some asked if I was open to commissions or custom projects. Others simply sent words of love and encouragement, saying they'd been moved to tears by my honesty. I'd never been much of a social media person, but this outpouring of warmth took my breath away. Amid these messages was one that stood out, a publishing company representative named Nina, who suggested I write a memoir. She believed my story, one of late in life empowerment, could resonate with a broad audience. At first, I laughed at the idea. Me writing a book. But something about her pitch stuck with me. Maybe my experiences could help others walk away from toxic family dynamics or discover hidden talents they'd set aside. In between painting sessions, I jotted down memory scraps of my childhood meeting Elliot, the birth of Aubrey, the years of raising Celeste. I wrote about the heartbreak of giving so much of myself that I forgot who I was. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt, as if each word lifted a piece of the burden from my shoulders, yet every so often doubt crept in. I'd think of Celeste and wonder if I was betraying her by sharing our struggles. But then I'd recall the sting of her laughter, that dismissive cheep directed at the art I poured my soul into. If telling my story could heal me and maybe even help others, then perhaps it was worth the risk. On a brisk Saturday, just as I was settling down to paint, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Celeste on the porch, her auburn hair now styled in a loose braid that draped over one shoulder. She looked different, tired, and somewhat nervous. "Nana, can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside to let her in. My heart pounded, unsure whether this was another act of manipulation or a genuine attempt at reconciliation. She clutched her phone in one hand, tapping it nervously with her thumb. Her eyes darted around the living room, taking in the changes. New canvases leaning against the wall. A small trophy from the Manhattan Gallery, articles about me. Framed near the bookshelf, I saw the news. "About your art show," she said, voice trembling a little. I had no idea it was such a big deal." She paused, then continued. "I'm sorry for not congratulating you earlier." I nodded, not entirely sure what to say. She settled onto the old couch, the same one she'd once jumped on as a little girl, pretending it was a pirate ship. "Nana, I know I messed up," she said, eyes glistening. "I was thoughtless and selfish, especially on my birthday. I was just caught up in the moment, trying to impress everyone, but I never meant to hurt you like that." I inhaled slowly, struggling to stay calm. "It's not just about that one day, Celeste," I replied. "You've been distant for years, treating me like an afterthought. And when you realized your college fund was in jeopardy, you suddenly reappeared in my life with apologies and affection that felt calculated." She flinched but didn't interrupt. Taking a shaky breath, she said, "You're right, I was desperate. College is crazy expensive, and I got scared. I thought if I just made you feel sorry for me, you'd give in. But it wasn't just the money. I really do miss the way we used to be." Her confession hung in the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. In that silence, I studied her face. She seemed older than her years, burdened by guilt and perhaps regret. But was it enough to bridge the chasm between us? If this story speaks to your heart, consider subscribing for more narratives that explore the complexities of family art and self-discovery. Thank you for reading. Celeste leaned forward, hands clasped. "I know. I can't undo what I said or how I treated you," she began, voice trembling. "But I want to try to make it right, Nana. Not because of the money, but because I realize now how important you are to me. You've always been there, and I took it for granted. Part of me wanted to wrap her in my arms and assure her everything would be okay. But I'd done that too many times before without any real change following. So instead, I asked her the hardest question: what makes this time different?" She blinked, tears threatening to spill. "Because I finally understand what it's like to lose someone's trust. My friends, the ones I was trying so hard to impress, drifted away the moment I wasn't cool enough or didn't have money to go to fancy places. And then I realized I pushed away the one person who always loved me unconditionally." I studied her face, remembering the child who once snuggled against me on rainy days to watch cartoons, the teenager who used to roll her eyes at my old-fashioned advice, and the young woman who'd torn my heart open with her derision. Celeste, I began, my voice catching. Do you realize how deeply that moment at your birthday party cut me? It wasn't the words alone. It was the realization that you saw nothing of value in my offering. She nodded, tears now streaming. I know, and I hate myself for it. She swallowed hard. I'm not expecting you to just hand over the college fund anymore. I'm working 2 part-time jobs now, applying for scholarships. I might have to start at a less expensive school. But I need you to know that I'm not here to beg for money. I'm here because I miss my Nana. My composure cracked at that. A tear slipped down my cheek. Could it be real this time? Had she truly learned I wanted to believe her? God knows I wanted that more than anything, but a fragile hope was all I could muster. Let's take it one day at a time. I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. After Celeste's tearful confession, something shifted between us. She began dropping by weekly, not with grand gestures or rehearsed lines, but simple visits. Sometimes we'd share a quiet cup of tea and talk about her job at a local bookstore. Other times, she'd help me tidy up or show me the sketches she'd been working on for a community college art class. One afternoon, we sat in my living room flipping through old photo albums. There was an image of Celeste at 5 years old. Her hair then cropped into a bowl cut that Aubrey thought was practical. She was grinning ear to ear while hugging our golden retriever. Millie Celeste chuckled at her own image, then looked at me sheepishly. I forgot how much I loved drawing Millie. She admitted I even tried to make a comic book about her. Once I smiled, recalling how that comic featured Millie as a superhero who saved squirrels from oncoming traffic. The memory was sweet and bittersweet at once, a reminder of the raw creativity that used to drive Celeste before the pressures of social cliques and appearances clouded her heart. Gradually, we found ourselves reminiscing about the times we used to paint together. She even asked if we could try again someday. My class wants us to recreate a childhood memory as a final project. She explained. I felt my heart flutter with a cautious kind of joy. Of course, I replied, trying not to let my excitement show too plainly. But while I embraced these moments with Celeste, I remained mindful of the boundary I'd set about the college fund. She never brought it up, true to her word, and so I quietly let myself believe that this was a genuine reconnecting, not a transaction. Meanwhile, my art career showed no signs of slowing down. I was invited to participate in a group show in Boston, then another in Philadelphia. Sales were steady, and the interest in my upcoming memoir draft grew. My days were suddenly filled with more painting and writing than I'd ever done before. Amid that whirlwind, my reconciliation with Celeste was a slow dance, tentative steps, a few missteps, but always moving closer. A few months passed and winter began to settle over Vermont. The nights grew long and cold, the landscape dusted with soft snow that reflected moonlight in ethereal shades of white and silver. I often found myself at my easel by the window, painting the hushed scenery outside. It felt symbolic, like a quiet, hopeful pause before something new emerged. During one of Celeste's visits, she hesitated at the threshold of my studio, where canvases half-finished leaned against the walls. "Nana, can I watch you paint?" she asked. I nodded, motioning for her to come in. She perched on a stool, hugging her knees, her braid dangling over her shoulder. For a while, we just stayed like that, me working on a piece filled with swirling blues and purples, her watching silently as the brush danced across the canvas. After a moment, she broke the silence. "I never thanked you for inspiring me to love art. Even when I dropped it in high school, it was always the one thing that felt real." She spoke softly, as if confessing something sacred. I paused, my brush turning to look at her. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry I threw it away for so long." "It's never too late," I said, my voice gentle. "Art is patient. It's always there when you're ready." She nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the faint spark of that little girl who once believed paint could transform a blank sheet of paper into a wonderland. I guided her through a few strokes, letting her feel the texture of the paint, the subtle give of the canvas. It was a fleeting moment of pure connection, no talk of money, no guilt, no suspicion. When she left that evening, she gave me a tight hug. "I love you, Nana," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me back in." I whispered that I loved her too, and we both understood this was still a fragile piece, but it was a beginning, one built on truth rather than silent resentments. As Celeste and I continued to rebuild our relationship, my artistic journey took another leap forward. The small memoir I'd been drafting captured the interest of a reputable publishing house. They sent me a contract promising distribution and a promotional tour. If I could finalize the manuscript within 6 months, I was thrilled and terrified, me traveling around to talk about my life. It was surreal. Amid the excitement, I confided in Celeste about the book deal one quiet afternoon. She reacted with genuine warmth, hugging me and laughing in disbelief. "My grandma's going to be a published author," she exclaimed, eyes shining. She even offered to help me with any editing tasks or social media promotions. The shift in her attitude was palpable. She seemed sincerely proud rather than jealous or opportunistic, and that more than anything made my heart brim with cautious hope. Meanwhile, Aubrey's stance softened as well. She called one evening, apologizing for how she'd handled the entire college fund fallout. "I guess I was just worried about Celeste," she said. "I didn't stop to think how badly she hurt you." Though Aubrey never fully admitted her role in enabling Celeste's entitlement, she did express relief that Celeste was working part-time and taking more personal responsibility. "Maybe you cutting off the fund was a blessing in disguise," she ventured. I smiled at the irony, how what began as a painful decision was leading to new growth in our family. I told Aubrey about my book contract, and to my surprise, she offered to come up and help me reorganize my office space. "We can make it more writer-friendly," she joked. It was the most comfortable conversation we'd had in years. A winter storm raged outside as I hung up the phone, but inside I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. My life wasn't perfect. There were still scars and unresolved tensions, but I was beginning to realize that sometimes you have to break old patterns, no matter how painful, in order to create space for something new and beautiful to grow. Over the following weeks, Celeste proved her sincerity in ways that no longer felt performative. She invited me to attend her college art show at the local community college. When I arrived, I saw her standing beside a display of charcoal sketches and watercolor experiments. Her hair was pulled back with a patterned headband, a more casual style that suited her new approach, less flashy, more authentic. She introduced me to her classmates, beaming as she explained that I was her grandmother, the person who first taught her how to hold a paintbrush. Some of them recognized my name from the articles and the Manhattan exhibit, and Celeste glowed with pride rather than envy. It was a small showcase, just a handful of student works pinned to display boards, but it felt monumental to me. Here was Celeste embracing her creativity not for social status, but for the sheer love of creation. Later that evening, as we sipped cocoa in my living room, she told me she'd been accepted into an art institute in Boston. It wasn't her original dream school, but it was a solid program. "I got a partial scholarship," she said, eyes bright. "I'll still need loans, but it's doable." She hesitated, then added, "I just wanted you to know. I'm grateful for everything you did, the money you saved and the lessons you taught me. I messed up and I lost that trust, but I'm working to earn it back." It was the closest she'd come to directly addressing the lost college fund in weeks. My breath caught and I saw how brave she was being, acknowledging a harsh truth and forging ahead. Anyway, I reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're doing the right thing," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you." She offered a watery smile. That means a lot, Nana. Looking into her eyes, I realized that while the road we'd traveled had been littered with heartbreak, maybe we both needed that tumult to find our footing again. Sometimes love has to crack open for the light to get in. Time marched on, and the day of my book launch arrived. A small event at a local Vermont bookstore where Celeste worked part-time. The publisher had arranged for a modest gathering, a short reading, a Q&A, and a signing session. Standing at a simple wooden podium, I gazed at the audience, a mix of supportive neighbors, local art enthusiasts, and new friends I'd met through my exhibitions. A gentle hush settled over them as I began reading an excerpt from my memoir titled Late Bloomer Finding My Voice as a Grandmother. Artist and woman, I spoke about the early days raising Aubrey, then Celeste, while setting aside my own aspirations. I recounted the heartbreak of Celeste's dismissive words at her birthday party, describing how that humiliating moment became the catalyst for reclaiming my identity. My voice trembled at times, but I felt a surge of courage as I glanced up to see Celeste in the front row, tears in her eyes, yet wearing an encouraging smile. When I finished, the applause was soft but genuine. Questions followed about how one finds the courage to break old patterns, about whether it's ever too late to chase dreams. I answered as honestly as I could, emphasizing the importance of self-worth and the strength that comes from confronting our own pain. By the end of the evening, I'd signed copies for everyone who wanted one, writing personalized notes in shaky script that left me feeling deeply connected to each reader. But the moment that truly undid me was when Celeste approached with her own copy. She opened it to the first blank page, and I saw a note she'd scribbled there. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to love Cell. She handed me the pen, eyes shining, and asked me to sign. My tears blurred my vision as I wrote a simple message. For my granddaughter, who reminds me that it's never too late to learn how to love better. We hugged, and in that embrace, I felt the culmination of a journey that had begun with heartbreak, but ended with a deeper bond than either of us had ever known. Thank you for following this story so far. Don't miss out on future narratives. Subscribe now for more tales that celebrate triumph, love, and self-discovery. In the months that followed, I watched as Celeste navigated her new life with resolve and humility. She balanced her part-time work at the bookstore, her classes, and occasional visits to my place to paint and chat. Though our relationship was still healing, we both recognized how far we'd come. Aubrey, too, seemed more at ease. She visited more often, sometimes joining our painting sessions or simply sharing a homemade dinner. Our once fraught family was finding its rhythm again, not perfect but genuine, stitched together by the threads of understanding and respect we'd earned the hard way. As for me, I continued to grow in ways I never imagined. My memoir found modest success, prompting invitations to speak at local women's groups and art collectives. My paintings sold steadily, and I even managed to exhibit in small galleries across the country. Each new adventure felt like a gift I'd been denying myself for years, a reminder that life doesn't end when your children and grandchildren become adults. It can, if you allow it, begin anew. One sunny afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail from the Boston Art Institute. Celeste planned to attend. Inside was a handwritten note from one of her instructors, thanking me for the inspiration my work had given the incoming class. Apparently, Celeste had shared my paintings and bits of my story with her peers, describing how art can be both a personal journey and a bridge to others. I held the note with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the realization that the very gift Celeste once mocked was now lighting her path forward. Looking back, I recognized how heartbreak had catalyzed an unexpected rebirth for both me and Celeste. I had learned that sometimes you must draw a firm boundary, even with those you love, to protect the sacred wellspring of your own identity. And in doing so, you might just inspire them to discover their own depth, their own resilience in ways neither of you could have predicted. Standing in my studio, I marveled at a fresh canvas brimming with possibility. With each brushstroke, I celebrated the second chances life had granted me as I filled that blank space with swirls of color. Joy, sorrow, hope. I smiled. Celeste's college fund was gone, and yet in its absence, something much more valuable had taken root. Our shared understanding that respect, genuine love, and artistic truth matter far more than money ever could. Thank you for joining me by the fireside tonight as we explored this powerful journey of betrayal, redemption, and rediscovery in She Mocked My Gift Publicly Now Her College Fund Is Gone. This story beautifully reminds us of how every ending can become a new beginning, and sometimes we must stand firm even against those we love to truly find ourselves. I hope this tale resonated deeply and perhaps inspired you in your own journey towards self-worth and healing. Remember, your voice matters, and I'd love to hear your personal reflections. Have you ever faced a similar family struggle, or perhaps a moment that changed your perspective forever? Share your thoughts below in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. Don't forget to subscribe to her Fireside Stories for more heartfelt narratives that warm your soul. Until next time, stay inspired, stay strong, and keep your fires burning bright.